I'd like to start with a prayer, if we might. Gracious God, thank you for another Lenten season, a time in which we focus a little bit more intently and intensely on our faith and perhaps how we might grow more into our faith. Be with us in this time here. Be with us in the other classes that we are having here at First Methodist for Lent this year. Open us to your word and your presence in everything that we do, but particularly in these classes. Bless us here in this class as we take a look at and learn more about our dreams, our dreaming self, and the dreaming process itself. Be with us that we might grow to be more faithful followers of you and members of this church. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thanks for showing up. I just had no idea who would show and how many. I've explained the procedure that every week we're going to go through pretty much the same process. Get together for a half hour. And I'd like us in the next following weeks, as we get together, to begin talking about perhaps questions that may have come up. Next week, let's see if you have questions that will have come up from what you take home today. I'm going to be talking about some information about dreams and dreaming, some background, and there'll be an outline for each week. My practice as a pastor during the last decades of my ministry was that during Lent, we might take an opportunity to learn some new spiritual practices, or if not learn new ones, go back to some that we've used or perhaps practice ones that we regularly use a little more intensely. At Whittier Presbyterian, we used to have a little Lenten study book that had a reading for every day, and we would do that. I'm thankful to John, Pastor John, for the opportunity to share my interest in dreams as a spiritual practice with you all. This is something I've been doing for actually over 50 years now. And it's a great love of mine, and it's fun to be able to share it with others and to watch others grow into the process as well. And I hope that will take place here. I've done a lot of different classes in teaching spiritual practices in my career. General prayer, praying the Psalms, Lectio Divina, praying with a labyrinth. You know what a labyrinth is? Those things you walk in with a pattern. Praying with icons, the Greek or Russian Orthodox paintings that are not just paintings, but they are prayer and spiritual discipline pieces of art. That's a whole practice of itself. And spiritual direction and dreams and dream work are the practice that we're talking about here. My hope is that you will learn enough about and be comfortable with your dreams in such a way that they will be a help to you in everything that you do, in your spiritual life as well as your waking life. Joan was telling me about a precognitive dream she had where she dreamt about the change of directors or of the Rio Hondo Symphony. And my guess is many of us have had precognitive dreams. You know what I'm talking about? Where you dream something and in days or weeks or months later, the dream happens. Almost exactly. Yeah, okay. We'll be talking more about these kinds of the specialties, the varieties of dreams as we go along. I'm a retired Presbyterian pastor. For those of you who do not know me, I was the pastor of Whittier Presbyterian Church, which was on El Rancho. Now it shares the facility with Salem Lutheran Church on Glengarry, down sort of the west end of Whittier. I have my Doctor of Ministry degree, which was on dream groups in the church. I ran 4 dream groups in 4 different churches for a year and then wrote all that up. And that's how I got my Doctor of Ministry degree. I also have what's called a diploma in the art of spiritual direction. For me, spiritual direction is the container into which I put my dream work. And that's essentially what we'll be doing here. Your dreams, as we look at them, are going to be a part of how your faith develops, how it works, how you practice it. They may also help you in a variety of other ways, possibly. We'll see how that unfolds in the next 6 weeks, and then I'll be curious to hear in the next year or two what you may have gained from this class that you use kind of on a regular basis. So we'll see how that works out. I have developed a 3-step process with my dreams. This happened within about the first 2 years of my keeping track of my dreams, where I would record my dreams, I would write them up, and then I would reflect on them briefly. Gee, why did I dream about that? Why that person? Why that activity? So on and so forth. And then I would write a prayer for the day based on all of that stuff, not necessarily on the dream itself, sometimes, depending on the relevance of that dream to what my day's activity might have been. So that's the routine that I've developed and have been using for decades now. I've already mentioned that I've written a book. It's on the table back there. It's available for a $20 donation to the church, and then you just take the book. There are 2 other books that I have chapters in back there. One of them is a chapter on the attitudes of John Calvin and Martin Luther on the dream texts in the Bible. You may be aware that there are a number of Bible stories that have to do with dreams. There's Joseph in the Old Testament, Joseph in the New Testament, Daniel, and a number of others. And I looked at how Martin Luther and John Calvin commented on those dreams to see what their attitude towards dreaming was. In our 4th session, Pastor John is going to come in and talk about John Wesley's attitude towards dreams. And we talked just briefly this morning. He said he was surprised how much Wesley had to say about it. So I'm looking forward to that because that's an area I'm not familiar with. An adopted Methodist? I don't know what to call myself now since I've been here for 12 years now. So that's one of the books. The other book is called Dreams and Spirituality or something like that. And my chapter is The Benefits of a Parish Dream Group. I started a dream group in my church at Whittier Pres, and it ran for about 8 years before I retired. And then it kept going for another 3 or 4. It's sort of disbanded now. 2 of the members have passed away. No, one of them passed away, one of them moved away, and life happens, as you know. My hope would be that out of this class, there might come a dream group at First Methodist Whittier. I think that would be really cool. I would be happy to be a part of it, to facilitate it, to help get it going, to pass it on to someone else. So let's see how that all happens. So let me just go through an outline. Today is an introduction. Next week, I'm going to talk more specifically about the 4 points that I have come up with that are the values of dreams and dream work for Christians. And I'm going to talk about the Wesleyan quadrilateral, which you may have heard about. Good. I see head shaking. Glad to hear it. Glad to see it. The awkward stuff in dreams. What happens when I dream about killing somebody or killing myself or having sex with somebody I should not have sex with? Those are the kinds of things we're not comfortable dreaming, let alone talking about. But we'll explore how do we work with those in our own dreams. And then session 3, biblical dreams. And we'll go through the dreams in the Bible and see how they have influenced the story, the gospel story. The next session will be dreams in church history. And that's when Pastor John will come in and talk about John Wesley. And then the session after that will be dreams and spirituality and spiritual practices. And I'll talk a little bit more about those things that I mentioned. Prayer, praying with the Psalms, praying in a labyrinth, praying with icons and that sort of stuff. And the last session will be challenges and the future and some apps and things that people can use to help them in their dreaming. I know 2 people already have told me about they have Fitbits, is that what they're called? Yeah, that track their REM sleep. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. Yeah, an Apple Watch does a good, there's a plug for Apple Watches. So that's kind of an outline of what we're about. I want to read a scripture passage that I think is appropriate for Lent. This is the letter to the Ephesians in the 4th chapter. But speaking the truth in love, we must grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by every ligament with which it is equipped, as each part is working properly, promotes the body's growth in building itself up in love. Growing up into Christ is, to me, a part of what we try to do when we do Lenten disciplines. How might I learn something new that would help me grow into Christ, grow to be more Christ-like in whatever I do? One of the things that I read once upon a time that really struck me is from Karl Rahner. I'm going to be quoting from my book frequently. No plug intended, but that's where the material is. Karl Rahner was a Roman Catholic theologian who came out of the a German, came out of the Second World War wondering, where do we go as Christians, German Christians in particular now? And here's what Rahner had to say. I know I have it in here. I can quote it from memory, and I think I will. The Christian of the future will either be a mystic, that is someone who has an experience of God, or they will be nothing at all. And you can imagine somebody coming out of the Second World War having to go that deep in their life. If they do not have some deep experience of God, what's it worth? How do we come to grips with the horrors that happened in the Second World War, particularly for Germans? So that's one of the ways in which dream work can help us be mystics, is to experience, to find God in our lives in a more concrete, lived fashion. And our dreams can do that. Other practices can do that. Prayer, worship, being together with other Christians, all of those help build our faith. But I think dreams have a particular value and ability to grow that faith that I hope we'll be able to demonstrate as we go through this together here. Now let's have a little discussion. Why do you think God might have created us dreaming? What function does dreaming have for us as human beings and maybe as Christians? Guesses, if any of you have done any reading or heard any scuttlebutt?
I'm just thinking it helps you get out or get through frustration.
Get through frustrations?
Well,
Okay.
your brain takes on certain things that you obviously are frustrated with.
Right.
You know, so
Yep.
like those recurring dreams. Why do you keep having that same stupid dream? You know.
Why do you keep having that same stupid dreams, you say?
Yeah, well, it's the stress dream thing. You know, there's a stress dreams issue where the dream you keep having when you're under stress, it's a dream where you're dreaming something that's very stressful and you wake up right out of it. And I wonder what that's for, unless it's to maybe relieve it. I don't know. Because you wake up and you say, oh, thank heavens, that was just...
That's right. Other comments?
I think sometimes there are things in your life that you don't want to think about or you don't want to face.
Yeah.
But when you dream, there it comes to you.
Yeah, that's right. Good point. And yeah.
I read a book by David Eagleman called Livewired. It was a fascinating book generally about the brain, but he did have a short chapter on dreaming. And his theory was it was our visual cortex wanting to maintain its place in the brain, preserving its priority with it. Well, because until we invented lights, as he pointed out, for millions of years, when it was dark, we had nothing visual that we could see. And during that time, that part of the brain wasn't active. So it would create these visual images to keep that part of it active and kind of preserve its priority.
That's a new one. I haven't heard that before. Okay, there are lots of theories. No theory has yet achieved universal acceptance. Nobody really knows what the full function of dreaming is. We know that it helps us in what we call memory consolidation, to remember something. And they've done tests where students who are going to be taking exams, those who get good sleep and dream perform better on the exams than those who cram all night, for example, or who don't remember their dreams. There's a distinction there. You may get good sleep, but if you don't remember your dreams, you may not remember things, you may not consolidate those memories, etch them into your soft hard drive up there. So that's one function. There's another that is dreams are survival mechanisms. If you dream that a saber-toothed tiger is going to attack you, when it actually happens, you may be better equipped to deal with it. So those who dream and think about their dreams are going to survive better. Evolution is a great big system that we run everything through in these days. Let me go back and go through some of the aspects of dreams and dreaming. And I want to make the distinction that the dreams that we're talking about are our nighttime or nap time, sleeping dreams, the dreams that we have when we're asleep. We're not talking about a dream vacation. We're not talking about, all due respect to Martin Luther King Jr., I have a dream. That's more of a vision. Those are valid, big time valid. The Bible has a lot more visions than it does dreams. But what we want to focus on is that nightly activity that takes place when we're asleep. So I'm going to read some stuff about that. And this is a definition of dreaming. A night dream is a spontaneous, symbolic experience lived out in the inner world during sleep. Such dreams are composed of a series of images, actions, thoughts, words, and feelings over which we seem to have little or no conscious control. The people, places, and things of our dreams can sometimes be related to remembered life experiences or images that remain in our memory, but often they seem to come from sources to which we have little or no conscious access. That's a rather elaborate definition of what happens in our dreams. And why do we dream? Another reading. What purposes do they serve? Despite millennia of human dreaming and the more recent applications of new scientific tools and fancy watches, we have no idea ultimately why we dream. It remains a mystery. Aspects of it we get, like the memory consolidation. the dealing with stress and frustrations. Those all happen, but other stuff happens as well. And we find as we explore dreaming more often that there's just so much. And one of the things that I find, because dreaming is so mysterious, we're able to project our own stuff onto it. Dreaming can be a plot device in storytelling and movies. You can throw a dream in there to twist things around in such a way, and it's plausible. It works, but not always does it accurately reflect the experience that most of us have in our nighttime dreams. So that's one of the things I've noticed over the years, is that when somebody uses a dream in a story or a plot, I try to evaluate how close is their representation of dreaming to my experience of dreaming. And sometimes it's just way out there. And then I know, oh, they're really trying to move this plot in a new direction. And the only way they can do that is to say it's dreaming. So that's a little different than what we're going to be doing. Also, there is a physiology of dreaming, and I wish I should have thought about bringing in a whiteboard or something, but the two that have the Fitbits on their watches will tell them when they go through the periods of dreaming and what periods of sleep. When we sleep, we go through various periods of sleep, and that's measured by our brain waves. We start when we're awake and we fall asleep, and we go through what's called the hypnagogic period. How many of you can remember starting to fall asleep and jerking awake suddenly, or something happens? That's the hypnagogic point, where when we are fully asleep, our motor nerves are turned off. So that when we dream, most of us are not going to act out what we're doing in the dream. Now, there's this thing called REM sleep disorder, where people do act out what's in their dreams, and the people they sleep with sometimes suffer for it. And that's a medically treatable condition. But we fall asleep, we go through that hypnagogic period, and then we get into the REM period. REM is an acronym for rapid eye movement. And what happens is our eyelids are closed, but our eyes are moving. And one of the ways that people who think they're not dreaming, the people they sleep with, can watch them and watch when that rapid eye movement starts. Wake them up. What's going on? Oh, well, I do dream. Because we'll see that everybody dreams. 99.999% of human beings dream. Many of us don't recall them. That's the issue, is recall. Not the fact that we don't dream, it's that we don't remember them. And so if someone who says they don't remember, there are things called sleep laboratories where you go in and they wire you up and they watch how your brain is functioning while you sleep. And they can see the brain waves do different stuff at the different periods. And in REM sleep, there's a lot of activity. In fact, they have found that our brains can often be more active when we're asleep than they are when we're awake. That takes a little bit to get your mind around, because we think when we're asleep, we're out. Well, physically we are out, but mentally in our brains, we're sometimes working even harder. And that gets at the issues about dreams help us with frustrations and things that we're not certain about. The brain is working on that stuff even though we're asleep. And that happens. And this cycle takes about 90 minutes. We fall asleep and then we come back up. And one of the things that I recommend for people who have a difficult time remembering their dreams is wake yourself up during that REM cycle. And one way to do that is drink a bunch of water before you go to sleep. And at 90 minutes, you're going to have to go to the bathroom and you will wake up. And my guess is you will begin to remember dreams better that way. Now, we go into this REM cycle 3 or 4 times a night, and the REM cycle lasts longer each time we go into it, so that by the time we wake up in the morning, we've had a good long REM period. And that's the time when we have the most recall of our dreams, because it's just before we wake up. So that's sort of the physiology of it. And that jerking awake that I mentioned as we fall asleep, when we fall asleep, the motor nerves shut down. So again, to repeat myself, we're not acting out what we're dreaming. And that's important because we do some weird stuff when we're dreaming. And if we were to act out on that, we would hurt ourselves, hurt somebody else. Who knows what could happen. But it's a way in which our mind acts out what it's feeling. And our emotions are a key part of our dream. And it's really important to try to remember, what was I feeling at that point in the dream? We'll come back to that as we work on the process of trying to remember our dreams. So I'd like us to talk about how to record our dreams, because I'm hoping that you all will do that in this Lenten period. Now, the method I use is I have one of these little tablets right next to my bed, and I also have a pencil with pen light. See that light there? That way, when I wake up from something, I can grab the tablet, make my notes, And I don't turn on the light or anything like that. Wake up my wife. If you sleep alone, you can turn on the light and make your notes. The difficulty, particularly as we get older, is getting back to sleep the more you wake yourself up. So you want to do as little a disturbing process as possible. So if I can lay still in the position and grab my tablet and make my notes like this with my little light on so I can see what I'm writing, just make some notes. And then in the morning when I wake up, I take the page of the tablet and I go in and I enter all my dreams in my computer now. Been doing that for 26, 27 years. That enables me to go back and search for dream themes. One of the things that you can do as you begin to pay attention to your dreams is see how often do you dream about a particular person or event or activity. And if it's in my computer, I can do that search very easily. But I'm a super dream geek, so that doesn't really apply to everybody else. Perhaps just a dream journal is sufficient for you. But again, having a tablet, and as you get used to this, you may only need to write a phrase or two on the tablet to remind you of the dream. And then when you write the dream out later, you'll remember the details. It takes a little bit of practice at that, but it's helpful. John?
When you started, would you write something that you couldn't read in the morning?
Sometimes. Yeah, I still do that.
Because there's a Jerry Seinfeld episode where he had a funny joke and they wrote it in the middle of the night. You read it in the morning, you couldn't read a word.
Right, yes.
So I always think that's what's going to happen.
It depends. Sometimes it does, yeah. Or I'll get all of it except for that one word. What was that? What?
So if that happens, you don't give up. Just
Yeah, that's right. Keep at it. So that's how I record mine. I know people who, again, that sleep alone, use their phone to record it. And that can work too. So yeah, some can talk to their watch. Not all
I
of us.
have a bed partner. I can't do that.
So those are ways to record.
They also have a phone app that will only record when it hears sound. People use it to see if they snore when they sleep.
Uh-huh.
And so if you wake up and then start talking, it'll just record that. And so then once you're done and you wake up, it'll only have the sections where you
talk. Yeah. See how modern we can be and how much easier it can be for us to do our dream work. There's a lot of, I mentioned the apps that people have on their phones that track your sleep, but there are also ways of doing dream recording and so forth. There's also a phenomenon called lucid dreaming, which is when you are dreaming, you are aware that you're dreaming. And then if you know you're dreaming, you can say, well, here's a fork in the road. Which one will I take? Whereas in a non-lucid dream, you just generally go down one or the other. In a lucid dream, you can decide, or you can say, oh, maybe I'll turn around. You can be more deliberate and conscious in a lucid dream than in a non-lucid dream. I'm not a lucid dreamer. I have tried many times. I think lucidity in dreaming is a gift that not everybody has. And also theologically for me, I want to hear what my dream self has to say to me. The way I put it theologically is I want to hear what God has to say. I don't need to tell God what to tell me or to tell God what to do. And lucid dreamers don't like to hear me say that, but that's just one dimension of how dreaming works. Have any of you had dreams where you've been aware in the dream that you're dreaming? Okay, couple, 2, 3. Okay, yeah, 4. Yeah, yeah, occasionally, yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah?
Oh, she's a lucid dreamer.
Okay, good for you. There you go.
CJ.
I think that too.
It almost makes you wonder, are you really dreaming?
Right.
Yeah. Because you're like,
Yes, that's the feeling I've had in my really.
I've also solved dilemmas
I have to.
in the night, like, and I'll wake up and I'm like, man, I figured it all out. You know,
Yeah.
streaming.
Yes.
I think
yes.
that's God talking to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Yes.
really weird.
That's how we faithful folks would say that.
I have
Because
heard
it's
that.
happened to me and it was
It
wonderful.
works. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
figured it all out. I just had to go to sleep.
Yeah.
On that point,
I'll sleep on it. That's what you mean.
let me make some more references to those kinds of phenomena. And I have 5 in the book. I'm aware of a book that has 80 plus listed of them. Here's George Eastman, the founder of Eastman Kodak Company, dreamt of a way to produce film for color movies as well as a plan for how to market it. He wired his production chief the dream's details and told him to get started. You know the Eastman Kodak Company, yes. German chemist Friedrich August Kekulé figured out the structure of the benzene ring through a dream of a snake biting its tail. And if you've ever studied chemistry or organic chemistry, you'll know that Kekulé's insight was a major breakthrough in chemistry and chemical engineering. Albert Einstein, we know who he was, at age 14 had a dream that led to his formulation of the theory of relativity. George Frederick Handel first heard the last movements of his musical masterpiece, The Messiah, in a dream. Love that one. This is one of my very favorites. American inventor Elias Howe had a dream that contributed to the invention of the sewing machine. He dreamt he was being chased by natives in a jungle and that the spears they were carrying had holes in the tips. You know how a sewing machine works?
Yes.
The invention happened because they finally figured out how to get the thread down there instead of at the top. And Howe had this dream that enabled that, which I think is just one of the coolest dreams around. So there's some examples of the sort of stuff, Julie, that you're talking about, of I figured stuff out. And I've had that experience many times, not where I figure something in the dream, and even the dream doesn't seem particularly related, but I wake up and I'm full of energy in the waking consciousness. I do figure some things out and I take some next steps. So the dreaming process enabled me once I woke up to take that sort of activity. Also, one last word about as we age. Roger was talking about a book he'd read earlier that indicates that our REM sleep period decreases as we age. When we're children, our sleeping is about 50% REM. And you can imagine that children, they are growing so fast and experiencing so many new things that their dreaming mind is working overtime, perhaps. And as we age, the amount of REM sleep decreases so that when we get to our age, and I'm speaking generically here, we dream less. We have less REM sleep. And I've encountered that, and particularly in this group that I'm a part of, the International Association for the Study of Dreams, where all of us who've been doing this stuff for decades are now saying, gosh, I can't remember as well as I used to. Plus, if you take any medications, particularly for sleep, if you take sleep medications, then you need to pay attention to how that affects your dreams if you're going to try to pay attention to your dreams. I knew a guy who said all he did was dream work his whole career, and he could tell sometimes what medications certain people were using by the way their dreams were structured, which I thought was quite a gift. But that's something to think about. If you're going to try to remember your dreams and you take medications to help you sleep, or whatever other medications you take affect your sleep, you want to check that out and see if there's a way around that, or sometimes maybe it's just taking a nap instead of trying to do your dream stuff at night. So, questions or comments at this point? I want to move us into the next point, which is...
Is this going to help us dream better?
We'll see. My guess is it will, because you're starting to pay attention to it.
Yes, exactly.
And as soon as you pay attention to it, I found, especially about 20 years ago, when I decided to do all this dream stuff, boy, my dream recall shot through the ceiling for what that's worth. Let's see what happens. Will we recall our dreams more so and better as a consequence of being involved in this process? Hopefully, we'll be reporting every week.